The rain had fallen steadily over Portland that Friday evening, casting a silvery glow over the streets and making the city feel smaller, more intimate, almost as if it were holding its breath for what was about to happen. Ethan sat alone in his apartment, staring at the dim reflection of the streetlights on the wet pavement. He could hear the faint patter of rain against the window, a rhythmic reminder of the storm of emotions swirling within him. Tonight was the night Margaret had arranged the dinner, the evening where all three girls would be in the same room. And he would have to confront the truth of his heart. He ran his fingers through his hair, his mind a jumble of conflicting thoughts. Sophie's playful laughter, Claire's gentle understanding, and Lily's vivacious energy danced in his memory, tugging him in every direction. He had come to care for each of them in ways that were deeply personal, profoundly different, and yet equally significant. The idea of choosing one over the others felt both impossible and necessary. When the doorbell rang, his heart skipped a beat. Sophie arrived first, her red scarf wrapped neatly around her neck, the same scarf that had first drawn his attention. She smiled at him, a mixture of hope and apprehension in her eyes. "Hi, Ethan," she said softly. I'm ready." Claire appeared next, calm and composed as always, her brown hair tied back and her gaze steady. She offered him a small, reassuring smile. "Good evening," she said. "Thank you for inviting me." Finally, Lily arrived, vibrant as ever, her eyes sparkling with warmth and mischief. She carried a small bouquet of wildflowers, which she handed to Ethan with a playful grin. "I hope these are okay," she said. "I thought they might brighten the evening." Ethan's chest felt tight. The sight of all three girls in his living room, their presence filling the space with energy, warmth, and expectation, was almost overwhelming. He realized that the journey of love was never simple, and tonight would be the ultimate test of his honesty, courage, and self-awareness. Margaret, seated quietly at the corner of the room, observed him with her usual calm but approving gaze. "Ethan," she said gently, "this is your moment. Your heart has guided you this far, and now it's time to speak, to act, and to choose. You owe it to yourself and to them to be honest." Ethan nodded, swallowing hard. He took a deep breath and turned to Sophie first. "Sophie, you've brought so much joy into my life. Your laughter, your creativity, the way you make ordinary moments feel extraordinary, it's something I'll never forget. You've made me feel alive in ways I didn't think possible." Sophie's eyes shimmered. "With emotion?" "Ethan," she whispered, reaching out to touch his hand lightly. He paused, letting the moment linger, knowing that every word carried weight. Then he turned to Claire. "Claire, you've shown me a different kind of love, one that's patient, understanding, and steady. You've made me feel seen, heard, and truly understood. With you, I felt a depth of connection I never thought I would experience." Claire's lips trembled slightly, a faint smile forming despite the tension. "Thank you, Ethan," she said softly, her voice full of sincerity. Finally, he looked at Lily, who had been standing a few steps away, her bouquet clutched to her chest. "Lily, you've brought light into my life in ways I never imagined. Your energy, your courage, and your fearlessness have shown me parts of myself I didn't know existed. Being with you has been exhilarating, inspiring, and unforgettable." Lily's eyes glistened, her lips curved in a bittersweet smile. "Ethan," she breathed, her voice catching slightly. Ethan felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He realized that love was not just about attraction, desire, or companionship, was about truth, commitment, and the courage to face the consequences of the heart's choices. He had spent weeks navigating the complexities of his emotions, learning from each girl and understanding the parts of himself that each one illuminated. And now it was time to be honest, not just with them, but with himself. He took another deep breath, feeling the tension in his chest slowly give way to clarity. "I've thought about this so much," he began, his voice steady despite the storm inside. "And I know that my heart can only belong to one person fully. This is not because I don't care for the others, because I do, deeply. But love. True love requires focus, honesty, and presence. And my heart knows where it belongs." The room was silent, each girl holding her breath, waiting for the revelation that would change everything. Ethan's eyes met Sophie's, then Claire's, and finally Lily's. He saw hope, fear, longing, and trust reflected back at him. And then, with a quiet but unwavering certainty, he reached for the hand of the girl who had touched him in ways no one else had, who had made him brave enough to feel deeply, and who had shown him the kind of love that made him feel fully alive. "Sophie," he said softly, his voice filled with warmth and conviction. "It's you, my heart. It belongs to you." Sophie's eyes widened, a mixture of relief, joy, and emotion flooding over her. She squeezed his hand, her lips trembling with the effort to speak. "Ethan, I love you," she whispered. Ethan smiled, feeling a wave of calm wash over him. The decision had been agonizing, but the certainty of his choice brought a clarity he had never felt before. He turned to Claire and Lily, his expression gentle, full of gratitude and respect. "Claire, Lily, I care about you both more than words can express. You've taught me so much about love, life, and myself. But my heart, it has chosen Sophie. I hope you can understand, and I hope we can remain in each other's lives in ways that honor the connection we've shared." Tears glistened in Claire's eyes, but she nodded, a soft, accepting smile forming. "I understand, Ethan," she said quietly. "I truly do, and I'm grateful for the time we've shared." Lily, ever the spirited soul, nodded as well, her eyes reflecting a mixture of sadness and admiration. "Thank you, Ethan," she said softly, "for being honest and for letting me be part of your life, even if it's in a different way." The tension in the room began to ease, replaced by a profound sense of relief, understanding, and mutual respect. Ethan realized that love was never about perfection or simplicity, was about courage, honesty, and the willingness to face the hearts. Truth. Margaret, watching quietly from her corner, allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Her plan had worked not because she had controlled love, but because she had guided her son to discover it within himself. That night, as Ethan and Sophie walked hand in hand along the rain-slick streets of Portland, the city felt alive with possibility. The lights reflected off the wet pavement like tiny stars, and the air carried a promise of new beginnings. Ethan felt his heart open fully, free from confusion and fear, ready to embrace the journey of love with Sophie by his side. And as they paused to watch the river glimmer in the moonlight, Ethan realized the profound truth he had discovered through the turmoil of the past weeks. Love is never easy. It is never simple. But when it is real, it is worth every heartbeat, every tear, and every impossible choice. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt truly complete, knowing that he had chosen not just a person, but a life where his heart could love fully, deeply, and without reservation. And as Sophie leaned against his shoulder, smiling softly, Ethan knew that the story of his heart had only just begun, a story of love, growth, and the courage to follow where the heart leads. No matter how complicated the journey, this expanded Part 4 emphasizes the emotional climax, resolution, and heartfelt closure, while maintaining the romantic and dramatic tone suitable for your storytelling channel. If you like, I can also create a fully polished YouTube narration version of the entire story, with pauses, hooks, and pacing designed to keep the audience emotionally engaged for your channel. Ethan's life had transformed into a whirlwind of emotions. Each day seemed brighter, yet heavier, filled with exhilaration and uncertainty. Sophie, Claire, and Lily had become constants in his life, each pulling him in directions he had never imagined, awakening parts of his heart he had long forgotten. And while he had come to cherish each of them, the burden of choice weighed on him more heavily with every passing moment. It was on a quiet Friday evening when Ethan found himself walking along the riverbank with Sophie. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp leaves and the faint, earthy aroma of the river. Sophie's hand brushed against his as they walked, sending a subtle shiver down his spine. He looked at her, noticing the soft curve of her smile and the way her eyes seemed to sparkle even in the fading light. I've been meaning to tell you something, Ethan," Sophie said softly, her voice carrying a gentle hesitance. She paused, then took a deep breath. "I think I'm falling for you." Ethan's heart leaped. He wanted to respond immediately, to confess everything he felt, but the words stuck in his throat. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, unsure of what to say. He cared deeply for Sophie. There was no denying the tenderness she inspired in him. But he also felt the pull of Claire's calming presence and Lily's vibrant energy. Sophie's gaze searched his, vulnerable yet trusting, and Ethan felt a surge of emotion he couldn't name. He squeezed her hand gently. "Sophie, I don't know what to say." She smiled, a small, understanding curve of her lips, and said quietly, "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know." The moment lingered, heavy with unspoken feelings. Ethan realized that love was never simple, and now, with 3 hearts intertwined with his, it had become almost unbearably complex. The very next evening, Ethan received a call from Claire. Her voice was soft, almost trembling. "Ethan, can we talk? It's important." They met at the small cafe where they had first connected. The rain had begun to fall gently outside, painting the city streets in glistening reflections. Claire's eyes held a seriousness he hadn't seen before, and his heart tightened in anticipation. "I don't want to hide this anymore," Claire began, her hands resting nervously on the table. "I think I love you, Ethan." The words hit him like a sudden gust of wind, to confessions in as many days, and his mind spun. He wanted to reach out to both girls, to tell them that they were cherished, but he couldn't. His heart was no longer a simple compass, had become a battlefield of longing, desire, and fear. Claire, I care about you," he managed to say, his voice low and strained. "You know that, but I need time to understand what I feel." Claire nodded, her eyes glistening but accepting. "I understand," she said softly. "I just wanted you to know." As if fate were determined to complicate his life further, Lily's presence entered his thoughts with an intensity that was impossible to ignore. That night, Ethan found a recording waiting for him on his phone, a song Lily had written and performed just for him. Her voice was hauntingly beautiful, each note carrying longing, hope, and an unmistakable affection. Ethan listened to the song over and over, the lyrics embedding themselves deep within his heart. Lily's music had a way of stirring his soul, of making him feel alive in ways that Sophie's warmth and Claire's understanding could not. Her energy, her creativity, and her fearless openness ignited a desire within him that was both thrilling and terrifying. By the time the weekend arrived, Ethan felt as though his life had become an emotional storm. He moved from one encounter to another, from the playful intimacy of Sophie's company to the comforting depth of Claire's presence, to the electrifying vitality Lily brought into his world. Every moment was filled with joy, yet it was tinged with guilt and anxiety. How could he possibly navigate the affections of 3 women without causing pain? How could he reconcile the love he felt in 3 very different ways? One evening, Ethan sat alone in his apartment, staring at the rain sliding down the windows. He thought about the moments with each girl, the warmth of Sophie's hand in his, the gentle understanding in Claire's gaze, and the irresistible vibrancy of Lily's laughter. He felt torn, lost, and desperate for clarity. His phone buzzed. A message from Sophie. "Can we meet tomorrow? I just want to be near you." A message from Claire. "I'll be at the cafe at our usual time. There's something I need to share." And a recording from Lily, her voice tender and insistent. "Listen to this when you feel alone. I'm always with you." Ethan's heart raced. The three of them were woven into his life so tightly that separating even a moment of thought was impossible. He realized that he had to confront the truth both for himself and for them. The love he felt was no longer something abstract or distant. It demanded recognition, honesty, and courage. The following days were filled with small, quiet moments of reflection. Ethan revisited each encounter in his mind, replaying conversations, laughter, and shared silences. He recognized that with Sophie, he felt curiosity, warmth, and tenderness. With Claire, he felt understood, valued, and safe. And with Lily, he felt alive, energized, and seen in ways that thrilled him to his core. But the realization came with weight. He could not live in the middle of this triangle of affection forever. He could not divide his heart equally among them, no matter how strong the feelings were. He had to choose, though the idea of making such a choice filled him with dread. Ethan decided to speak with Margaret, hoping her wisdom might provide some guidance. They met in the quiet comfort of her living room, the aroma of freshly brewed tea filling the air. "I don't know how to do this, Mom," he admitted, his voice raw with emotion. "I care about all three of them, but I can't. I can't love them the way they deserve if I try to split my heart." Margaret listened, her hands clasped together, eyes gentle but unwavering. "Love is never simple, Ethan. It's messy, it's complicated, and it often hurts. But it's also the most beautiful thing you'll ever experience. You can't control who you love, but you can control how honest you are with yourself and with them. That's where courage comes in." Ethan nodded slowly, the truth of her words settling over him. The confessions, the songs, the laughter, they were all a mirror of his own heart. He had to confront the feelings he had been avoiding, to face the reality that his choices would shape not only his life, but the lives of the three women who had come to mean so much to him. That night, he sat alone, writing in his journal, a ritual he had returned to in moments of reflection. He wrote about Sophie's warmth, Claire's understanding, and Lily's vibrancy. He wrote about his confusion, his longing, and the ache of desire that had taken hold of him. And then, for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to acknowledge the possibility of making a choice, not yet knowing what it would be, but knowing that clarity would come only when he faced his heart honestly. Ethan realized that love was never about control or certainty. It was about vulnerability, courage, and the willingness to let someone see the deepest parts of yourself. And now, with Sophie, Claire, and Lily, he understood that the journey of love was as much about self-discovery as it was about connection. As he drifted into a restless sleep that night, the image of all three girls lingered in his mind. Their faces, their voices, and their presence had become entwined with his own identity. He understood that the next steps would be crucial, painful, and transformative. The confessions had been made, the feelings laid bare. Now he had to navigate the storm of his heart with honesty, courage, and care. And in the quiet darkness of his apartment, Ethan felt a small spark of hope. Hope that, no matter how difficult the path, love would guide him to the truth. This expanded Part 3 focuses on the confessions, Ethan's inner turmoil, and the emotional complexity of being torn between three people who each bring something unique to his life. If you want, I can now expand. Part 4, in 2,000 words, giving a satisfying, emotional, and heartfelt conclusion to Ethan's journey with Sophie, Claire, and Lily. After meeting Sophie, Ethan felt as though a quiet storm had settled in his heart. Her presence lingered in his thoughts like a soft melody, her laughter echoing in the corners of his mind. Every time he returned to the bookstore or wandered along the river paths of Portland, he imagined her bright smile, the swirl of her red scarf, and the warmth in her eyes that seemed to understand parts of him even he hadn't fully acknowledged. But Margaret's plan wasn't finished. The second girl, Claire, was about to enter his life, and she would do so in a way completely unlike Sophie. Where Sophie was spontaneous and playful, Claire was calm, intelligent, and grounded like a quiet river that ran deep and steady beneath the surface. Ethan first met Claire on a brisk Saturday afternoon at a small, sunlit cafe downtown. Margaret had arranged for him to sit at a table by the window, the late autumn sunlight spilling across the wooden floors. Claire arrived with a book tucked under her arm and an air of quiet confidence, her brown hair neatly tied back and her eyes calm, yet piercing. "Hi, Ethan," she said gently, her voice carrying a softness that somehow demanded attention. "Mom said we should meet." Ethan nodded, slightly taken aback by the way she seemed to observe him without judgment, as if she were trying to see him for exactly who he was. There was no flamboyance, no dramatic flair, just presence, quiet and firm. They began talking about small things at first, the weather, books, and favorite cafes. But gradually, the conversation shifted, and Ethan found himself opening up in ways he had never expected. He spoke about his childhood, about the quiet loneliness that had sometimes shadowed his life, and about the small joys that often went unnoticed. Claire listened, really listened, her gaze steady and unwavering. She asked questions that made him think, but never pushed him. She seemed to have a natural understanding, a sensitivity that made Ethan feel seen. And in her calm, methodical way, she drew out parts of him that even he had kept hidden. For the first time, Ethan realized that love wasn't only about excitement or laughter, was also about trust, understanding, and connection. With Claire, he felt safe to reveal the quiet, serious parts of himself, the vulnerabilities he had long hidden. Yet, even as he grew closer to Claire, Sophie's presence remained vivid in his mind. The memories of Sophie's laughter, her playful teasing, and the spark she ignited in him lingered, tugging at his heart. It was as if two different forces were pulling at him, each irresistible, each necessary. Then, as if to complicate matters further, Lily entered his life. She was introduced by Margaret on a rainy Sunday afternoon at a small music venue in the city. Lily was vibrant, lively, and impossible to ignore. Her presence filled the room the moment she stepped in. She had a smile that could light up the darkest corners and a laugh that seemed to chase shadows away. Lily was a musician, and the first thing she did was hand Ethan a small folded piece of paper with lyrics she had written. "I thought you might like this," she said, her eyes twinkling. The words were simple yet striking, speaking of longing, hope, and the quiet ache of desire. Ethan felt a strange rush as he read them, the emotions resonating in ways he hadn't expected. With Lily, Ethan felt alive. Her spontaneity was thrilling, her energy infectious. Every conversation was unpredictable, every moment with her vibrant and full of possibility. She challenged him in ways Sophie and Claire hadn't, forcing him to step out of his comfort zone, to embrace the unexpected, to feel fully alive. Within a few weeks, Ethan's life became a delicate balancing act of emotions. He spent afternoons wandering the city with Sophie, exploring art galleries, sketching, and talking about dreams that felt distant yet tantalizingly close. Evenings were often spent with Claire, discussing literature, philosophy, and the kind of quiet intimacy that made him feel understood and safe. And Lily, she drew him into her world of music and adventure, late-night walks in the rain, impromptu piano sessions, and laughter that made his chest ache with happiness. Ethan's heart, once calm and simple, now felt torn in three directions. Each girl awakened something unique within him. Sophie stirred tenderness and curiosity. Claire offered understanding and stability, and Lily sparked passion and excitement. And each day, the more time he spent with them, the more impossible it became to reconcile his feelings. He began to notice the subtle ways in which each girl affected him. Sophie's playful teasing made him laugh in ways he hadn't in years. Claire's gentle encouragement made him reflect, reconsider, and grow. Lily's exuberance pushed him to try new things, to embrace risks he had never dared take. Each presence left a mark etched into the deepest corners of his heart, making him realize how much life could expand when touched by love. But with this new awareness came confusion, guilt, and fear. Ethan knew he couldn't give equal love to three different people. Human hearts were not designed for such complexity. He felt torn, anxious, and often overwhelmed by the intensity of his emotions. The moments of joy were tinged with worry. Would he hurt them? Would he disappoint Margaret's careful orchestration? Most importantly, what did he truly feel? One evening, as he sat alone in the bookstore after closing hours, Ethan reflected on the whirlwind his life had become. He thought about Sophie's laughter, Claire's steady gaze, and Lily's infectious energy. He realized that love wasn't simple, neat, or controllable. It was messy, unpredictable, and powerful. And now, more than ever, he had to confront what it meant for him. Margaret, ever observant, noticed the subtle tension in his demeanor. One evening, she asked gently, "How are you holding up, Ethan?" He sighed, a mix of frustration and awe. In his voice, "Mom, I don't know. I care about all of them. I don't even know if I can choose." Margaret's eyes softened. "It's not easy, I know. Love never is. But this is the path you must walk. Your heart will guide you, even when it trembles. The feelings you have, each one, is valid. But honesty with yourself and them is what matters most." Ethan nodded, though he wasn't entirely convinced. He knew the coming weeks would test him in ways he hadn't imagined. Each girl represented a different possibility, a different facet of love. And each tugged at him in ways that were impossible to ignore. As the nights grew longer and the leaves began to fall in Portland, Ethan felt the weight of his emotions pressing on him. Every encounter left him exhilarated and exhausted. Every conversation stirred something deeper within. And yet, amidst the confusion, a single realization emerged. Love, in all its forms, was worth feeling even if it hurt. Even if it was complicated, and even if it meant facing impossible choices. 1. Rainy afternoon, Sophie handed him a small sketch she had drawn of him quietly reading in the bookstore. Claire sent him a handwritten letter reflecting on a conversation they had shared about hope and life. And Lily, of course, sent him a recording of a song she had written just for him, her voice soft and haunting. Ethan held each memento close to his heart, realizing that love was not a single path, but a journey filled with unexpected beauty, pain, and revelation. And as he looked out the window at the rain-soaked streets of Portland, he understood one undeniable truth: the heart could hold more than he had ever imagined. But he would have to face it honestly if he wanted to discover where it truly belonged. And in that quiet, reflective moment, Ethan knew that the next steps, decisions, confessions, and heartbreaks would change his life forever. The storm of emotions had only just begun, and he had to navigate it carefully, with courage, honesty, and a heart open to whatever came next. This expanded version focuses on Ethan's inner conflict, emotional depth, and his experiences with Sophie, Claire, and Lily, giving a full 2,000-word immersive feel, if you want. I can also expand Part 3 in the same style, where the emotional tension escalates and the girls start confessing their feelings, making Ethan's heart even more conflicted. Ethan Harris had always considered himself an ordinary man, living an ordinary life in Portland, Oregon. He liked the simple things, browsing the shelves of his little bookstore, sipping coffee while reading novels and hiking the quiet trails that led away from the city's hum. Life was predictable, comfortable, and, in its own way, peaceful. Yet, there had always been an emptiness, a subtle longing in the corners of his heart, a feeling that something essential was missing. Though he had never dared to define it, it was a late Tuesday evening when Margaret, Ethan's mother, asked him to sit with her in the cozy living room of their small house on Elm Street. The room smelled faintly of lavender and old books, and the soft golden light of the lamp cast comforting shadows across the walls. Margaret had always been a woman of strength and warmth, the kind of person whose quiet confidence could make even the most difficult conversations feel safe. But tonight, there was something unusual in her eyes, a glint of determination, mixed with a hint of mischief. "Ethan," she began softly, her voice calm, "I need to talk to you about something important." Ethan raised an eyebrow, curiosity, mixed with unease. "All right, what is it, Mom?" Margaret took a deep breath, folding her hands neatly on her lap. "I've been thinking, you're at an age where love should touch your life. I want you to experience it truly, deeply, and I have a plan, but it's not a simple one." Ethan frowned slightly, leaning back in his chair. "Mom, what kind of plan are we talking about?" She gave a small, almost conspiratorial smile. "I've chosen 3 girls for you." Ethan froze. "Excuse me?" 3 girls, Margaret repeated calmly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I've been observing, listening, and learning about people who might bring love into your life in different ways. Each of them has qualities. I think you need someone who will challenge you, someone who will comfort you, and someone who will bring excitement and light. I want you to meet them." Ethan blinked, incredulous. He laughed nervously, trying to make sense of the words that hung in the air. "You picked girls to love me? Mom, that's insane." Margaret's gaze softened. "I know. It sounds strange, but I've watched you grow up, Ethan. I know your heart, and I see that it's ready for something more than friendship, more than ordinary companionship. You deserve love, real love, and I think these 3 girls, they could show it to you." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, trying to process the sudden revelation. He was flustered, overwhelmed, and oddly fascinated. "Mom, how do you even know that love works like this?" She chuckled lightly, a sound that made the tension in the room soften. "I don't, but I do know people, and I've learned to trust intuition. You don't have to decide anything now. Just meet them, see who they are, and then your heart will guide you." Despite himself, Ethan felt a tiny spark of curiosity. There was something almost magical in the way his mother spoke, like she held a secret about life and love that he had yet to discover. The following week, Margaret arranged for him to meet the first girl. Sophie was unlike anyone Ethan had ever met. She was a painter, her hands often smudged with color, her eyes alight with mischief and creativity. When she walked into the bookstore, Ethan noticed the way her red scarf fluttered gently behind her, the way she carried herself with a quiet confidence. Yet there was a vulnerability in her eyes that intrigued him immediately. "Hi, Ethan," she said softly, her voice carrying warmth and gentleness. "Mom said I should meet you." Ethan felt his chest tighten for reasons he couldn't explain. Her presence was calming, yet it stirred something restless in him. He found himself studying her face, the way her lips curved slightly, the sparkle in her eyes that hinted at stories untold. "Nice to meet you," he managed, his voice quieter than usual. They walked together through the bookstore, Sophie glancing at the shelves with curiosity, pointing out a few paintings she loved, and Ethan found himself laughing at her animated commentary. There was a lightness in her presence that made the world seem softer, more vibrant. For the first time in years, Ethan felt that old ache of loneliness ease, replaced by a cautious, tender excitement. Margaret watched from the corner. Her hands folded, a small smile on her face. She knew Sophie was just the beginning, a first step into a world that Ethan had never dared to enter, one filled with emotion, longing, and the possibility of love. Over the next few days, Ethan noticed how Sophie's influence began to ripple through his life. He found himself painting again, sketching little scenes in his notebook that he hadn't touched in years. He caught himself humming tunes he hadn't remembered knowing. And most of all, he found himself thinking about her at unexpected moments. The curve of her smile, the way she tilted her head when she laughed, the softness in her voice when she spoke his name. Yet as he felt this pull toward Sophie, a whisper of doubt lingered in the back of his mind. This was all his mother's plan. How much of his feelings were truly his, and how much were shaped by the careful orchestration of Margaret's design? He tried to push the thought away, reminding himself that love could not be forced, that it had to grow naturally. Then came the Latoura small, handwritten note from Margaret left on his kitchen counter. It read simply, "The other two girls will be introduced soon. Keep your heart open. You may be surprised at what you feel." Ethan stared at the words, a mixture of apprehension and curiosity swelling inside him. What did she mean? How could one heart possibly feel for three? And yet, a tiny part of him, the part that had always longed for connection, felt a spark of anticipation. Perhaps life was about to change in ways he had never imagined. That night, as he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Ethan thought about Sophia, about the way she had made him feel alive, seen, and strangely brave. And even though he had no idea what the future held, he realized one undeniable truth. Something in his life had shifted, and there was no turning back. Love, he realized, was no longer a distant idea. It had stepped into his life, painted in vibrant colors, and it was only the beginning. And somewhere deep inside, Ethan felt both excitement and fear. The world he had known so well was about to open up, and he was standing on the edge of a journey he couldn't yet comprehend, a journey that would challenge him, thrill him, and perhaps even break his heart. But for the first time in a long time, he felt ready. Little did he know, Sophie was only the first chapter of a story that would shape his heart in ways he could never predict.